One thing that we were discussing when we were looking at high-rises last week was the basic difference between purchasing a condo in a new construction high-rise, pre-construction, as opposed to once the building's already been built and all the finishes are in place and everything. What's your take generally on the costs and benefits of either choice?
Yeah, it's a bit difficult for some people to imagine what a project's going to be, what it's going to look like, what the space is going to feel like without anything there.
That's true.
So
I mean, there are
people,
model units in sales centers often. You can look at floor plans and all that stuff.
Right, right. But some people have a hard time. So until the structure's up and the sales center's in, sometimes, there are some people that just won't buy until they see that.
Right.
But if you know the reputation of the builder, you know the neighborhood, you know this is where you want to be, you can have a good sense of space from looking at floor plans, then it's good to buy pre-construction, because generally as the project goes on, every 6 months or 9 months or so, the price increases, the base price increases, because materials have increased, labor has increased, like recently gas has increased.
Yeah.
So those all have to be taken into consideration. A developer can't offer pre-construction prices for everybody as the project goes along, because his costs change.
Okay.
So that's not to say that you won't do well. I mean, even if you buy later in the project, once the project's finished, if you're there for 3 to 5 years, which is usually a good time, you're probably going to see some appreciation depending on where you bought.
Right. And it can also go the other way, that once a project is up and running and there are still a lot of units for sale that the developer wants to unload, they could cut the price.
Yeah, I've seen that a little bit in maybe some subdivision developments and that, but I haven't really seen that much in Chicago, because the developers don't want to undercut those people who've invested in their product, because they're going to be building other projects.
Yeah.
And I know developers that have clients that follow them from one project to the next, just because they like their reputation.
Huh.
And so one thing the developer...
Investors who are looking to...
Residents,
yeah.
People that actually like the type of building that the person builds, and yet they go from one building to the next because they've seen appreciation here, they bought in their building pre-construction, they've seen appreciation there, they just move on. Not a whole lot of people do that, but some people do.
Okay.
There was something else I was going to say about that. Oh, and then I don't know a lot about the construction stuff as far as finances, but my understanding is they have to have so many units under contract before they can get some of the money from the bank.
Right.
So, and then the other thing is, if the developer maintains his price, doesn't cut his price, well, toward the end of the project, maybe he's more willing to throw in parking. Maybe he's more willing to, reduce the cost of upgrades, just to try and get those remaining units under contract. But you'll never know, because the sale price is going to be the same.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in the MLS, you're looking at the sale price. You don't know what the individual paid for in upgrades and stuff like that.
Right. Okay.
How important is it, or should it be important, to a first-time buyer who's maybe looking at a high-rise around this area, with the notion that there are going to be, investors buying into these, the possibility that there could be rental units there, things like that. Are those the type of things? Why would that matter to a buyer if it does at all? And what kind of thing? What should they be looking at in terms of that?
Every developer usually has their own contract, and some developers have it written in their contract that buyers cannot rent.
Right.
Or if they do, they have to sell it back to the developer for the price they paid. When you buy into it, you do have to be aware of it, because once the project's underway, if you have over a certain percentage of renters in the building, the lender looks at that project differently. And the lender can increase their interest rates because they feel that they're taking a greater risk in a property where you have more tenants than you do owners, because you have less vested interest.
Okay.
So it can have an impact. The other thing you have to be aware of when you buy new construction is, and I tell my clients this, you really have to be involved when the association takes over. You have to know what's going on.
Yeah.
In some of the converted buildings, you know, maybe the developer said he was going to do the tuck pointing, but if you're taking over that association and you haven't hired someone to inspect the building and find out where the weaknesses of the building are before you sign on the dotted line saying the association now owns the building, you could have a huge special assessment, which has happened in some of these older buildings because the roof wasn't redone, the tuck pointing wasn't redone, maybe there was footing work that should have been done that wasn't. So as an association, generally after 75% of the units are closed, then the association takes over.
Right.
The building I live in, we had a very good board, and they took over the association, but they wouldn't take ownership of the building until the builder did A, B, C, D.
Okay.
He had to
Is that
redo
how
part of the work.
it
He had to-
typically works?
No, doesn't. I mean, it should, but you know, it takes a commitment on part of owners to get involved, to be willing to commit time and energy to look out for the best interest of your investment as well as your neighbor's investment. So the owners have to be willing to come up with the money to have maybe an electrical inspector or a roofer or, you know, different people come in, an auditor, review the books before you take over.
Right. Well, what kind of responsibility does the developer have to follow through with all the plans as they're presented pre-construction? For example, if they say, you know, we're gonna build a park on the adjacent lot that they own or something, and then they never follow through with that. Is that something that's going to be on my contract when
Most parks you're dealing with the city. They've agreed to do that, which,
yeah, I know,
which is
but
pretty good, but I know
I
what
mean
you're
just
saying.
green
Yeah,
space
yeah.
or a walkway,
Right.
or even a nice fence or something.
I have to say, most developers are very good at following through and
Yeah.
doing what they say they're going to do. The challenge we saw a couple years ago is a lot of these developers formed LLCs.
Uh-huh.
When the project was done, they dissolved the LLC and there's nobody to sue.
Oh my.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that's why it's important
That's
to not sign off on the dotted line until
Yeah.
everything that was committed to is done. An exercise room, storage lockers, you know,
Yeah.
things like that that add value, and that's what you bought into.
Mhm.
And you want to make sure that that gets done.
Right.
But as I said, most developers that I know of, in this neighborhood anyway, are very good.
Okay.